In April 1973, a document was filed away in a small office in New York City. It contained predictions so specific, so unsettling, that when people read them, they dismissed the author as extreme. The document was called The Vision, and it claimed to reveal what would happen to America and the world in the decades to come. Historians ignored it. Theologians filed it under sensationalism. But today, 50 years later, researchers are pulling that document back out. And what they're finding is sending chills down their spines. The man who wrote it wasn't a politician or a scientist. His name was David Wilkerson, a pastor who spent his life working with gang members and addicts in the darkest corners of New York. He wasn't known for prophecy. He was known for action, for getting his hands dirty in the streets. But in 1973, something happened to him that he couldn't explain. He saw something, a vision so vivid and so terrifying that it left him physically ill for days. When he finally put pen to paper, he knew people would laugh. And they did. The predictions seemed impossible. America was strong, the economy was growing, and the moral fabric of the nation, while frayed, seemed intact. But Wilkerson wrote it anyway. He published The Vision in 1974, and the backlash was immediate. Critics called him a fear-monger. Even some church leaders distanced themselves. But Wilkerson didn't back down. He simply said, "Time will tell," and time did tell. Today, if you open that book and read through the predictions, something eerie happens. You realize you're not reading prophecy anymore. You're reading today's headlines. The things that seemed laughable in 1973 are now documented reality, and that's what we're going to walk through together. Not opinion, not theory, just the facts, laid side by side with what Wilkerson saw 50 years ago. There are 5 major predictions in the vision that have come to pass with such precision that even skeptics are starting to pay attention. We're going to examine each one. You're going to see the original quotes, the timeline, and the undeniable fulfillment. But here's what makes this urgent. 4 of the 5 predictions have already happened. The 5th one, the one Wilkerson said would be the final sign, is the only one left. And if the first 4 were this accurate, you have to ask yourself, what are the chances he got the last one wrong? Before we go any further, I want to know where you're watching this from. Drop your city or state in the comments. Let's see how far this message is reaching. Because what you're about to discover isn't just history, it's a roadmap. And the question isn't whether Wilkerson was right. The question is, are you ready for what comes next? The first prediction in the vision was the one that got Wilkerson the most criticism. He wrote that America would experience a moral confusion so deep that right would become wrong and wrong would become right. He said that laws would be passed to protect what was once called sin, and that anyone who stood for biblical truth would be labeled as the problem. In 1973, that sounded absurd. America still had prayer in schools. The family unit was still considered sacred. The idea that the government would legislate morality in reverse seemed like paranoid fiction. But Wilkerson was specific. He wrote in The Vision, quote, "I see a time coming when the most vulgar, the most obscene will be protected by law, while those who speak for purity will be silenced." He saw a generation that would be so confused about identity that children would be taught to question the very DNA they were born with. He saw courts defending behaviors that the Bible explicitly condemns, and churches being forced to either compromise or be labeled as hateful. Fast forward to today. Look at the laws being passed across America and Europe. Look at what's being taught in schools. Look at what happens to teachers, coaches, or pastors who dare to say that God's design for gender and sexuality is fixed. They lose their jobs. They're dragged through court. They're publicly shamed. Meanwhile, the very things that were illegal 50 years ago are now celebrated in parades, protected by law, and taught to children as young as 5. This isn't political commentary. This is documented fact. Wilkerson didn't predict a political party would rise or fall. He predicted a moral inversion, a confusion so total that even children would be caught in it. And that's exactly what we're seeing. The gender confusion alone is something no one in 1973 could have imagined at this scale. But Wilkerson saw it. He wrote about it. And he warned the church that this confusion would be the foundation for everything else that was coming. Here's what makes this chilling. Wilkerson didn't just say this would happen. He said it would happen as a sign that the final phase was beginning. He wrote that when you see morality turned upside down by law, when you see the innocent punished and the guilty celebrated, you'll know the stage is being set for the last act. And if you look around today, you can see the stage is not only set, the curtain is rising. I want to ask you something. Have you noticed this shift in your own lifetime? Have you seen values that were once universally accepted suddenly become controversial? Drop a comment below and let me know. Because this isn't just about culture, this is about a timeline, and we need to know where we are on it. The second prediction is even more precise, and it's about something most people think is just random. But it's not random. It's orchestrated. The second prediction Wilkerson made was about the earth itself. He wrote that he saw nature in revolt, earthquakes in places that had never experienced them, weather patterns so strange that scientists would have no explanation, and famines that would sweep across nations that once had abundance. In 1973, climate science was barely a conversation. The idea of global catastrophic weather seemed like science fiction, but Wilkerson wasn't talking about gradual change. He was talking about sudden, violent, unexplainable events that would leave experts baffled. In the vision, Wilkerson wrote, quote, "I see earthquakes coming to areas that have never known them. I see floods, droughts, and heat waves that defy all previous patterns. Nature will seem to be at war with humanity." He described a time when the ground itself would shake in unexpected places, when storms would form with unnatural speed, and when entire regions would go from flood to drought in the span of months. He said these events would not follow the normal cycles, and that scientists would struggle to explain them using their models. Now look at what's happening. In the past 2 years alone, we've seen earthquakes in regions that were considered geologically stable. We've seen unprecedented flooding in areas that were in drought just months before. In 2024, parts of the Middle East that hadn't seen rain in decades were suddenly underwater. Meanwhile, other regions that depend on seasonal rains received nothing. Crops failed, water supplies dried up, and every time scientists try to explain it, their predictions fall short. But here's what most people miss. Wilkerson didn't say this was just climate change. He said this was a sign, a warning from creation itself, that time is running out. In the Bible, Jesus said that one of the signs of the end would be earthquakes in various places, famines, and fearful events from heaven. Wilkerson saw this playing out in real time, and he warned that when you see nature rebelling on this scale, you're not just witnessing environmental shifts, you're witnessing prophetic fulfillment, and it's accelerating. The floods in Libya that killed thousands, the fires in Hawaii that wiped out entire towns, the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria that devastated ancient cities. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a pattern, the same pattern Wilkerson described 50 years ago. He said the earth would groan, that it would shake, and that humanity would stand helpless before forces they could not control. I want to hear from you. What have you witnessed in your own region? Have you seen weather that doesn't make sense, storms that came out of nowhere? Drop your location and what you've experienced in the comments. Because this isn't just about data, this is about testimony. And when you start connecting the testimonies, you see the picture Wilkerson painted. The third prediction, though, hits even closer to home. It's about the church. The third prediction was the one that hurt Wilkerson the most to write. It was about the church, the very institution he had given his life to serve. In the vision, he described a future where churches would become entertainment centers, where the focus would shift from prayer and power to production and performance. He saw massive buildings filled with people who came for a show, but left without encountering God. He wrote that the church would have everything except the one thing it needed most, the presence of the Holy Spirit. Wilkerson was specific about what he saw. He wrote, quote, "I see churches that will look more like theaters than houses of prayer. The music will be professional, the lights will be bright, and the crowds will be large, but the altars will be empty. There will be no tears, no repentance, no power. The sermon will be motivational, but it will not convict. People will leave feeling entertained but not transformed." He said that pastors would become performers, more concerned with their image and their brand than with the souls sitting in front of them. In 1973, this seemed like an overreaction. The church was still a place where people went to meet God, where revival broke out, where prayer meetings lasted through the night. But Wilkerson saw something shifting. He saw the spirit of the age creeping into the sanctuary. And today, 50 years later, we see exactly what he described. Mega churches with light shows and fog machines, pastors with private jets and designer clothes, services that feel more like concerts than worship. And the saddest part, the people in the pews don't even realize what's missing. But here's what gives me hope. Wilkerson didn't just see the sleeping church, he also saw a remnant. He wrote about a small group of believers who would refuse to compromise, who would hunger for the real presence of God, who would gather in homes and small groups when the big churches went cold. He said this remnant would carry the fire, that they would be the ones who kept the light burning when everything around them went dark. That's where we are today. The show church is everywhere, but so is the remnant. There are believers all over the world who are waking up, who are tired of entertainment and desperate for encounter. They're not impressed by the stage anymore. They want the altar. They're not satisfied with a good sermon. They want a word from heaven, and God is raising them up just like Wilkerson said he would. If you're one of those people, if you're hungry for more than what the Sunday show offers, leave your name in the comments. Let's stand together as a remnant that refuses to settle. Because the fourth prediction is about to shake everything, and only those who are truly connected to God will stand firm. It's about the economy, and it's already starting. The fourth prediction in the vision was the one that seemed most impossible in 1973. Wilkerson wrote about a complete economic collapse that would begin in Europe and spread to America like wildfire. He described a global financial system that would crumble not because of war or natural disaster, but because it was built on debt and deception. He said that nations would print money with nothing to back it, that inflation would spiral out of control, and that eventually the entire system would need to be replaced with something new, something digital, something that could be controlled. In the vision, Wilkerson wrote, quote, "I see the American economy experiencing a catastrophic collapse. It will not happen overnight, but when it comes, it will come suddenly. Banks will close, savings will vanish. The government will scramble to create a new system, and that system will require total compliance." He said that Europe would go first, that their financial crisis would send shockwaves across the Atlantic, and that America, despite its appearance of strength, would follow. He also saw a move toward a cashless society, where every transaction could be tracked and controlled. Now think about where we are today. The European Union has been in financial turmoil for years. Greece nearly collapsed. Italy and Spain are drowning in debt. The euro itself has been questioned as a sustainable currency. And what did they do? They moved toward digital control. Meanwhile, in America, the national debt has exploded to over $34 trillion. Inflation is eating away at savings. The dollar is being challenged as the world's reserve currency, and governments around the world are pushing for central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, that would give them complete visibility and control over every financial transaction you make. Wilkerson saw this 50 years ago. He didn't have the term CBDC, but he described the concept perfectly. A system where cash is eliminated, where your ability to buy and sell depends on compliance with the government, where financial freedom becomes a relic of the past. And it's not conspiracy theory anymore, it's policy. Countries are already testing digital currencies. China has rolled theirs out. Europe is close behind, and America is not far off. But here's what Wilkerson warned. He said this economic shift wouldn't just be about money, it would be about control. He wrote that the new system would be used to silence dissent, to punish those who refuse to conform, and to separate people into two groups, those who comply and those who resist. And the church, especially the remnant church, would feel the pressure first. Are you preparing spiritually for what's coming? Not just financially, but spiritually. Drop a comment and let me know where you are in this journey. Because the fifth prediction, the one that hasn't fully happened yet, is tied directly to this. It's about persecution. And if Wilkerson was right about everything else, we need to pay attention to what he said comes next. The fifth prediction is the one that hasn't fully manifested yet, but the signs are everywhere. Wilkerson wrote about a coming persecution of true believers, not the kind of persecution where Christians are physically attacked in the streets, at least not at first, but a systematic exclusion, a quiet removal of those who refused to compromise. He saw a time when holding to biblical truth would cost you your job, your reputation, and eventually your freedom. He said the persecution would start softly, with social pressure and economic consequences, but it would escalate into something far more severe. In the vision, Wilkerson wrote, quote, "I see a time when it will become dangerous to be a true Christian. Not dangerous in the sense of war, but dangerous in the sense of consequence. Those who stand for biblical truth will be labeled as threats. They will lose their positions, their platforms, their ability to operate in society. The world will tolerate religious people, but it will not tolerate those who claim absolute truth." He described a climate where compromise would be rewarded and conviction would be punished, where the church would be forced to choose between acceptance and authenticity. And we're already seeing the early stages. Pastors fired for refusing to perform same-sex weddings. Teachers removed for using biblical pronouns. Christian business owners sued for operating according to their faith. Entire ministries deplatformed for preaching what the Bible clearly teaches. This isn't happening in some distant nation. This is happening in America, in Canada, in Europe, right now. The temperature is rising and most people don't even realize they're being conditioned for what comes next. But Wilkerson saw beyond the social pressure. He saw a point where true believers would have to meet in secret, where open worship would become risky, where the remnant church would go underground not out of fear but out of necessity. He wrote about a great divide, where cultural Christianity would flourish while radical, Holy Spirit-filled faith would be pushed to the margins. And in that margin, he said, God would do his greatest work. Here's the critical question. If Wilkerson accurately predicted moral confusion, climate chaos, the sleeping church, and economic collapse, all decades before they happened, what are the chances he's wrong about this final piece? The pattern is undeniable. 4 out of 5 predictions have come to pass with stunning precision. The 5th is already in motion. The only question is how far it will go and how fast it will happen. This isn't a message of fear. This is a message of preparation. Wilkerson didn't write the vision to scare people. He wrote it to wake them up. He wanted believers to see the timeline, to understand the season, and to get ready. Not ready with bunkers and stockpiles, but ready with oil in their lamps, ready with faith that doesn't bend, ready with a connection to God that can't be shaken. The final part of this message is about what you do now. So what do you do with this information? You could panic, stockpile supplies, and retreat into fear, but that's not what Wilkerson called for. In the vision, after laying out everything he saw coming, he gave one clear instruction: prepare your lamp. He was referencing the parable Jesus told about the 10 virgins, 5 wise and 5 foolish. When the bridegroom came, only those who had oil in their lamps were ready. The others were left outside, scrambling in the dark. Wilkerson said that's exactly where we are now. The bridegroom is coming, and the question isn't whether you're in the church. The question is whether you have oil. What does it mean to have oil? It means you have a relationship with God that goes beyond Sunday attendance. It means you've cultivated a prayer life that sustains you when everything around you collapses. It means you know the Word of God well enough that when lies are presented as truth, you can discern the difference. It means you've built community with other believers who are serious about their faith, people you can trust when the pressure increases. Oil is intimacy with God, and you can't buy it in a crisis. You have to build it now. Wilkerson wrote that the remnant church, the ones who survive what's coming, won't be the biggest or the loudest. They'll be the ones who stayed close to God when it wasn't popular, who prayed when others were entertained, who fasted when others were feasting. They'll be the ones whose lamps are full when the midnight cry comes. And that cry is closer than most people think. The signs are all around us. The timeline Wilkerson laid out in 1973 is almost complete. The final act is beginning. But here's the beautiful part. This isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the greatest move of God the world has ever seen. Wilkerson saw the persecution, but he also saw the power. He saw a remnant that would operate in signs and wonders, that would see miracles in the midst of chaos, that would preach the gospel with such authority that even in the darkest hour, souls would flood into the kingdom. He saw a church that looked nothing like the mega entertainment centers, but looked exactly like the book of Acts. Small groups, house meetings, believers who shared everything, and the presence of God so strong that no persecution could stop it. That's the church you're being called into. Not a building, not a brand, a movement, a family. A remnant that refuses to bow. And if you're hearing this message, if something in your spirit is waking up, that's not an accident. God is calling you to be part of what He's about to do. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And drop your prayer requests in the comments. We're in this together, and the best is yet to come.